What is art?
Art is
history.
What is art? That's a good question.
This is Art Uncovered.
Art is our collective cultural history.
A weekly podcast that brings you interviews with an eclectic mix of artists and creators.
Art is
disappointing your parents.
I'm your host, Kimberly. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Art Uncovered. This week, I was honored to speak with Monica Church, a Hudson Valley-based abstract artist working in painting, collage, and printmaking. Over the course of the conversation, we talk about Monica's journey to abstraction, her building of space through various materials, and her relationship to photography. Stick around. Welcome back, listeners. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Art Uncovered. This week, I'm so honored to be here with fellow Hudson Valley artist, Monica Church. Monica, it's so great to meet you.
It's great to meet you too, Kimberly. Thanks for having me on the Art Uncovered podcast.
Yeah, of course. So you identify yourself, I don't want to say primarily, but maybe largely as an abstract artist. So to start the conversation, I like to ask this question of my abstract artists. What drew you to abstraction?
It's an excellent question because I started out being very interested in portraiture, and I was trained at RISD to be able to draw what I saw. And when I was a junior there, I started to really question what I was doing because I was able to draw something very technically, but I really felt like it didn't have any soul.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a semester off and transferred to Bennington College, where I was working with some amazing abstract painters, Philip Wofford, Pat Adams, and Rochelle Feinstein, because I really felt like I needed to find my voice. And my voice didn't feel like it was going to be reflected in just drawing from life or working from using a narrative, let's say. So that's sort of how I became engaged with abstraction.
When you switched colleges, did you know that, or did you think that you would find the soul of a painting in abstraction?
I did.
Wow.
I did.
And was that something that you kind of experimented with a little bit? What school did you first go to?
Rhode Island School of Design.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you know what it was about abstraction that, because that's such a, like a very, I don't know, like it almost feels like it was a calling for you that you knew that abstraction to have, to have soul. Like, what was it about the abstract representation that you were so drawn to?
Well, I haven't thought about this, but now that you're having me think about it, I think it goes back to a summer program I went to when I was in high school in Vermont. And the woman who was teaching the drawing and painting was, in my mind, like a very chic New York, Boston artist. And she would show us contemporary work from the city and historical work. And she was showing us paintings by Mondrian and by Paul Klee and all these people. And everyone in my little group was so upset because we just wanted to learn how to draw. And I kept thinking, what am I not getting here? I was so fascinated with what she was showing us because I'd never seen it before. And I think at that point, I felt like there was an intellectual engagement in abstraction that I wanted to understand. And I think it took me a while to get there because I, kept following the path I was on, but that I still, good abstraction, good painters, they blow me away.
Yeah. I'm curious, because I did not study painting in school. Do you feel like, because I know you mentioned that you were an adjunct in painting and drawing, and you have your MFA in art. I'm curious if you feel as though many art programs, do you think they tend to steer contemporary artists away from abstraction?
Oh, that's a good question. I think as an undergraduate, you're trying to get the students, at least I was trying to get the students to be able to draw really well so that then they could take that and use it for whatever medium they wanted to use it in, and to actually be able to, if they were going to work abstractly, they would have the tools to do that because they would understand drawing. They would understand how, graphite goes over a surface, not just how to represent something, but something about that material. So, I don't know. And I don't really know what people are doing now because I'm just old enough that a lot's happened in the pedagogy since I was teaching.
So the next question was one that, so this is for you all listeners that Monica and I were kind of chatting about for a second or two before we hit record. And so the question that I had planned was, did you ever find yourself like in a conversation with someone who is anti-abstraction? And if you were, I'm curious, like, what would you say to that person now? So here's me asking you, have you ever been in a conversation with an anti-abstract artist or
Oh,
anti-abstractor?
only family members,
Hmm.
people who don't know anything about art or just really want to see like a deer in the woods. They have a very different idea of what they want to look at. So I've argued with them because they've had a hard time understanding why I spent money to go to art school or spent money to, do this. And when they see my work, they kind of just think it would be so much better if there was wildlife in it, and I'm not making fun of my relatives, but they love, they love wildlife, and it's just not what I do. On the other side, I do think they spend a lot of time talking with abstract artists about the trend in having narratives in work now, and that I don't want to have a narrative in my work because I want people to come to the work and bring their own narrative or create their own stories from what I put out there. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or
Yeah,
not.
yeah, no, it does, it does. Um, I wonder if, because I think I don't make abstract work really, but I could totally see my dad being like, "Well, I could do that." I mean,
Hmm.
it's the age old conversation that we're all too familiar with.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I guess I'm curious if you have any thoughts about this line of thought that abstract art is it's for people who can't draw, or it's a lack of skill, or any of those
Ooh.
other kind of condescending assumptions associated with abstraction.
I would go head to head with anybody drawing. Um, I think it's really important to have skills, to have drawing skills. And I do think that that's a problem with some undergraduate programs, and that they don't teach drawing well, or they don't. I think you need to be able to draw well to be able to paint, because you're creating forms somehow. Um, and I haven't actually heard anyone say that to my face, maybe because they know that I'm an abstract painter.
They're being
So.
polite. Uh, yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned drawing and painting as drawing kind of being a precursor to learning how to paint. And I guess this could be an interesting transition to talk about your work, because your work is currently kind of lives in both painting and drawing. So maybe if we can, I'm thinking maybe I'd like to start with your paintings, and then if we can
Mhm.
talk a little bit about your more drawing slash collage based work.
Mhm.
But beginning with painting, I'm wondering if you could tell me a bit about how you got where you are today. And listeners, apologies, I didn't mention this earlier. This is all. Our conversation is also being screened on YouTube. So at this point, I'm going to do a screen share. So if any of you are listening to this on Spotify or through any audio only platform and you want some visuals for Monica's work, search Art Uncovered Podcast on YouTube, and you'll find it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a screen share with you, Monica. And okay, can you see your work now? Your
I can.
website? Okay, so I clicked over in the paintings tab here, and I'm wondering, Monica, if maybe you could take the mic and tell us a bit about how you got to where your style is currently at.
Okay. Well, the work you're looking at is not on a traditional support. It's on sail material, as in sails that you would use to move a boat. So actual sails. And I feel like when I work, often it's material driven. And I'm going to go back a few years, but I studied with people who were very tuned into the post-painterly abstractionists, who were not putting like canvas, or not canvas, what's the word I want? Gesso on canvas. They were soaking the pigments right into the canvas surface.
Mm,
And then I worked as a paper maker for a few years, where you're actually making the support itself. And so I started being very interested in surfaces and how you could paint on different things.
mm,
This work is was my husband and I sail, so we have a number of old sails. And I just started to become fascinated with the beauty of the sail and how that there's this inner architecture in this work. Number of years ago, my daughter was small. I did work that looked very different than this. It was all circles and it was on canvas and it was in oil. And as she got older and as I started exploring different material surfaces, I started getting really interested in this because you have things like this window, it's transparent. And right before the pandemic, I started working on this material, and so then I suddenly everything shut down, and I was able to sort of just work with what I had in the studio, which was a lot of my old work. So these pieces started
Mm.
out with me taking old paintings that I didn't like so much and stretching the sail material over it and then sort of working in a
Nice.
collage fashion. And then I sort of like moved that out and started looking through them and seeing the support materials. And I was very interested in what happens to space when you're looking at these and you're looking at the surface and you're moving across the surface, but then you also move through it and that
Mm.
you get shadows and you get space. So there's space in front of sort of you, um, a a space that's created through the colors and forms that is flat, but that you're feeling in space in front of it, sort of
Mm.
thinking of Hoffman, and then you're going behind it and you've got that space there. And I just got just really interested in exploring that. And the other thing I want to say about the sail paintings was I really had fun making them, and I have fun making them. And it for a long time I was very, very serious about every brushstroke I put down. And I was like, you know what? Going into the pandemic, it made me feel like I needed to enjoy myself and I wanted the work to be it was okay if the work was happy. I mean, there's the one painting that's got the cloud in it. I never put like representational images in my work, but that was like a big step for me, but it was like it was a happy painting.
I
So,
want to, I really liked the phrase you used here. You said that you like the architecture of the sail.
mhm.
And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, because listening to you talk about your paintings, you seem to describe them in terms of almost like a 3D space that you would enter, yeah, enter into. So I'm wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about what you meant by you're interested in the architecture of the sail.
Okay, well, sails are designed by, of course, sail makers to be able to move a boat very quickly, and they're made with different fibers. Like this is Kevlar or graphite. I think this is graphite fibers that are those lines going through it,
Mm.
and it's all for strength and lightness. And so what I'm doing is I would take the sails and I would roll them out on my lawn, and I would bring my stretcher bars out, and I would then compose the space that I wanted to paint on, cut them out and stretch them, and then work from that. So really the sale itself is dictating what's going to happen on it next or how I'm going to interact with it
Mhm.
because it's providing almost like drawn lines to work from, if that
So,
helps.
so these kind of like geographic, almost like square and rectangular patterns, those are
Mhm.
native to the sail. You didn't
Yes,
impose
so the
that.
gold
Okay.
lines are Kevlar fibers, and then in the window, which is transparent, where the two those are the green circle and the red circle are
Yep.
called telltales. And when you're
Okay.
sailing, those let you know if you've got wind. This piece is a little different in that this is a transition piece and that it was stretched over linen. So it's the brown is from linen underneath it.
So you
Um,
had stretcher bars and then you stretched linen underneath and then this sail material over the top of it.
yep, and then collaged on top of that with other sail
Wow.
material. So there's
Wow,
paint and collage. Yeah.
very cool. And now in this one, and listeners, those of you who are listening, listening as opposed to watching, this one's so beautiful. So it's primarily white, and it almost, and I want to talk about this in a second, but it looks very feminine in nature. It almost kind of resembles like lace or crochet work or something like this. But it's these different geometric forms that have like a tight kind of weave pattern. And then there's like one subtle triangle of like bright orange with a little streak of blue. And are those little streaks of geometric colors, were those imposed by you as opposed
Yes.
to being part of this sale?
Yeah,
It's
no,
so
that's my paint.
fabulous. Yeah,
Thank you.
so fabulous. I love this one. How big are they?
This one is small. If you put your the cursor on it, it'll pop up with the size. So
Oh, yes, I
22
see.
by 16. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're just going to take a quick break here to make a few announcements. First, we are excited to announce that we are now on YouTube. So if you're listening to this episode on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like this, and if you're curious to have some visuals of myself, my guests, and their work, head over to Art Uncovered Podcast on YouTube. Also, I'm excited to announce that we are now officially a 501c nonprofit. So if you'd like to ensure the continuation of this podcast, please donate. Any amount that you can contribute will be very much appreciated. You could donate on our website at artuncoveredpodcast.com. And that's it for the announcements. Now we will continue with my conversation with Monica Church. Wow, and where do you get all these different sales? Because it looks like there's so many varieties. It's quite remarkable.
Well, it's kind of a silly story, but my husband and I bought a very old boat for hardly any money. It was basically a boat that had been used at this yacht club for years and had won lots of things. And one of the previous owners, every time that they would win their division for that sailing season, would get themselves new sails. So we got this boat, which literally, I mean, it was basically a gift. Someone pretty much gave it to us, and it had 17 sails on it.
Wow, that's
So it was like
amazing.
all this material, and my husband was organizing them and trying to find the sails that we'd use on the boat, because you really just need two. And he said, I think you need to look at this, do you want
Oh,
to?
that's
And I
fabulous.
was like, yeah. So I just brought it all up to the studio.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fabulous. Um, Yeah, these are really wonderful. And listeners, again, if you're listening to this as opposed to watching, I highly encourage you to take a look at Monica's website, monicachurch.org. And I will include links to her website on all the platforms, social media, and right on our website, artuncoveredpodcast.com. Yeah, this is very exciting to see. Very
Thank
exciting.
you.
And I'm curious, there was something on your website, and I forget what section it was, but was there a reference to was it knitting or patchworking or
Piecework.
yeah, and
Hmm.
I kind of want to talk about that a little bit because looking at your work, and I used this word before, but they look very, very feminine and kind of delicate. So I'm wondering if, women's work or women's labor or anything that you think about when, in your studio practice.
It is, and it's been for a while. I mentioned the work I did when my daughter was small, and I was looking at bridal beds or quilts for bridal beds made in, like, I think it was like Uzbekistan, the Suzanis. It's been a while since I've done the research, but they were all these references to like the Lunar New Year, and they were all hand embroidered. And if when
Oh, wow.
a young woman would get married, she would be given one of these quilts for her bed, for the bridal bed, in hopes that she would be fertile. And I did a whole series of work based on that, because I'd been really connected to sort of these circles, and kind of exploring that as a form. And then during the pandemic, I went through my work, that not the work that you just saw, but I had, you start thinking about your life and your mortality and what you were going to leave behind, and because of the situation we were in. And so I started editing, and I started cutting up my work and just reassembling it.
Is
And I
this
was
on your
making,
website? Is this on your website by any chance?
it
Okay, I'm
is,
gonna do a screen share again. Okay, and where could I find this body of
if you
work?
go to paintings
Yep.
and then reimaginings.
Okay.
So,
Oh
and
yeah,
these
there
are
it
just
is.
grids, but what I was thinking of, and they're all very small, but it's all work that I'd made, that I cut up and put back together. And when I was making it, it really reminded me of, like, my grandmother was a seamstress. She worked as a ironing clothes, actually, but she used to sew all of her own clothes. And um, it made me think about her doing that. And then my other
Mm.
grandmother had made incredible quilts. And it was just sort of that intimacy of making these small pieces that were from something that I had made. So all the things in it, there's no new added paint. It's just the work that's there. And so And I also was really interested in, I'd heard a talk at a College Art Association by a woman um, named Lisa Collins, who teaches at Vassar. And she wrote a book called Stitching Love and Loss, and it's about the Gee's Bend quilts. And she had talked about this quilt that was made by a woman after she lost her husband. And she made it just from his clothes, and
Oh, I
she
have
made it for
goosebumps.
comfort. It was so beautiful. And the way she spoke
Oh,
about it, I mean, she's just put this book out that I thought a lot about that as well, that, um, comfort in things. And I was getting comfort from making these and sort of feeling connected to this bigger process.
yeah.
So,
I'm curious. You mentioned comfort, but I think if I were to cut up my previous work, I'd feel very uncomfortable. Was it hard for you to cut up old work?
I really didn't. I have one painting left, and I can't bring myself to cut that one up. And I didn't cut everything up, but I did cut pieces up that were sort of, I guess, transitional, or that I just, you know, I don't know. I was just ready to whittle things down a little bit. And I have to say, making these pieces really helped me get through our lockdown. It was great. And I've sort of run the course of them now. I still have a few boxes of little squares, um
Wow.
and they were made sort of I would just start in one corner and move out and fill them in. So
Yeah.
I don't
I'm
know.
curious of the mechanics of them. Are they sewn together or glued together or?
They're all glued down on
Okay.
canvas or wood, and it's,
Okay.
glued with a extra heavy gel
Yeah.
medium.
Yeah. These are great. And yeah, these are tiny. They're like 10 inches by 8 inches is this one, and then 10 by 10. Oh my God. So the squares must be really tiny, like
Some of
an
them are
inch or
pretty
two.
tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like really obsessing.
Uh, Now, I'm also curious, Monica, maybe if we can, because I also want to make sure we chat about your collages. They're so fascinating. And I came across your collages just this morning when I was, doing my last minute research before we recorded. And there was a post on Instagram that you made about, I think it was just kind of like process photos, possibly
Mhm.
of your trip to, was it Puerto Rico?
Yes.
Yeah, to Puerto Rico. And my understanding is that when you travel, what you do is you pick up like pieces of paper that you find on the floor. So it might be like receipts or matchstick boxes or, advertisements or something like this. And then you create these amazing collages from them. Can you talk a little bit about this process or this body of work?
Okay, I can. When this started, you don't actually have these images, but when I was in graduate school, I went to Vietnam with my husband on a research visa. And so this was in before sanctions were opened, and I had this really romantic idea that I was going to make these beautiful watercolor paintings of Hanoi, and just I don't know what I was thinking. And I got there and I just was not at all interested in like painting the flowers or painting the buildings. I mean, I did a couple and was just like, this isn't working. And started collecting collage materials. And then every after it, and I should say there was nothing on the street. The streets were so clean because there was such abject poverty, everything was being used.
Oh,
But I
wow.
had receipts, and I had there was a lottery that people would drop their lottery tickets. I'd go to the market and I get something wrapped in like a Russian piece of a Russian book. It was in Russian. And so I started working there, and I made 30 collages while we were there, just every
Wow.
afternoon working. And it was the way I could process stuff because I wasn't actually working in photography at all then. So I wasn't taking pictures. So it's become this personal thing that I do, and these are what you're looking at. We did a semester at sea, which was with the University of Virginia at that point, and which meant we were on a boat, which was a college campus that went around the world. So we went to 14 countries,
Wow.
and we were gone, I think, 112 days. And what I did was, like, for example, in this collage, we found this donut shop in Japan. So all of the materials here are from Japan, but we were obsessed with these donuts. So that was sort of what this collage was about, and everything else was just stuff I picked up wherever we went.
Mm.
So and as the journey went forward, I was able to, the pieces I picked in Japan might end up in something I was making in Africa. But
Yeah.
it's sort of a way for me to work when I'm traveling. And as you mentioned, we just got back from Puerto Rico. It was our first visit there. And Puerto Rico is really clean, or at least San Juan was. We were only in San Juan. So I had trouble finding materials, but we did source a lot of like stickers, which I was then cutting up and on the airplane. I was rather than watching a movie, I was working with
Oh,
just the material that I got there. So it's
wow.
it's a way to kind of process it and to sort of, I don't know, it's material inspired, and I feel like they reflect in a way the spaces that I was seeing or the experiences I was having without just because of the nature of that the material is from there.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'd like to kind of go back to something that you briefly mentioned. There was your relationship with photography. You said in passing that you haven't take when you started these collages, you haven't really found photography yet. Can you talk a little bit maybe about, yeah, I guess how you found photography and maybe how you use it now? If that makes sense.
Um, it does. I should say that I fell in love with photography in high school, and I thought that's what I was going to study at college, but
Oh.
it wasn't. I kind of just took a different path, and then in 2007 08, my husband, my daughter, and I were in Ireland, and I was telling you that I had rented a studio space, and it was above a pub, which meant that it smelled good. I could smell
Mm.
food during the day, and I would go there and try to paint, and I spent a lot of time laying on the floor thinking about painting, and I really wanted to be out with this new camera that I'd
Mm.
purchased before this trip. And because I had a small child, I was realizing that it was very hard for me to focus on making a painting because every time I go back to it, it was like a whole new experience. I didn't have any
Mm.
continuity, and that something about working with photography allowed me to make work or see things differently. And I also had mentioned to you that this was post 9/11, and that I had sort of lost faith in abstraction at that point for a while. And I'm
Oh.
happy that I've gotten it back, but it really broke my heart because I was like, why am I painting abstractly? Because there's got to be something. I don't know. It was just very difficult for some reason. It really
Mm.
struck my work in a way that I didn't anticipate. In photography, it seemed that I needed to reckon with what I was seeing, and I really was interested in suddenly putting stuff out there that literally is what is coming from what my eyes saw. I know that may sound really ridiculous, but when you're painting, people can't see your inner thoughts. They see what's on the canvas. But when you make a photograph, at least the work that I do is I'm trying to represent what's there. I'm not doing any altercations. I might be doing what you would do in a dark room only in
Wow.
Lightroom, but nothing fancy. And that was a big challenge for me. And so I sort of stopped painting for a while. I kept doing collage and started working in photography, mostly when I was traveling. And that I always felt that I wasn't a photographer, but that I was a painter using a camera.
Mm.
Because I honestly don't think I think like a photographer. I'm not thinking in documentary projects, although I tried. I think I was much more always interested in the way, I don't know, color and shape and formal aspects of
Mm.
things.
How did you find abstraction again?
Um, I think that really was the pandemic, not in a lot of ways. I mean, coming
Oh
into
wow, so
that.
that's like 20 years,
Well,
right?
yeah. And also my
Yeah.
daughter went to college, so I suddenly had time again.
Ah.
And then of
Oh.
course she had to come home because because she got the pandemic happened, and
Mm.
um they had to move home. But I really find to paint I need time,
Mm.
in a way that I don't need with photography. And I think it's because you can capture something so quickly, or you see something and it allows me to stay connected to that feeling that you get inside when you see something that you want to photograph. If I don't do it, I feel terrible. But
Yeah.
it's like a creative impulse, and I think it's really important to follow up on those. But then I also have this wonderful thread of images that now I think that I'm in a new studio. I think will be really valuable that way for me
Mhm.
as sort of research, or
Mhm.
places to springboard from.
It's interesting thinking of, learning a little bit more about your path and your experience with photography and collage and painting. Now I feel like I'm looking at your paintings a little bit differently. They almost feel more like collages with material as opposed to painting. Does that resonate at
Hmm.
all?
It does. It does.
Mm.
Yeah, because I think that they're because of the geometric aspect of them, I'm putting in solid colors, areas of color. I'm not really making something that's creating its sort of a dimensional space on its own. It's really reliant on piecing things together. There's a piecing aspect that
Mm.
I'm very aware of.
Mm.
So
Now, did I remember correctly or write correctly? Because I made a note here about curation.
Mhm.
Are you a curator in any way, shape, or form, or did I make that up?
No, no, I am, but I would like to say that I'm not I'm not a trained curator. I
Okay.
took a couple of classes in college, and I think I tend to organize shows and end up being the person that is the thread that's bringing everybody together, and who So I do have a number of shows I put together. This one, I don't know. Can
Oh,
you see
nice.
the cover?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that, what does it say? In conversation, Sophia Healy and Andrea Woodner?
Yes. So
Okay,
this was
where
a
was the
show that
show?
this was curated. It was at the Palmer Gallery at Vassar College, and
Okay.
they're two artists who were connected at Bennington. I'm sorry, and Andrea was Sophia's student, and all these years, because now Sophia's in her 80s and Andrea's probably maybe in her 70s. They've been exchanging materials, or like one will find pieces of wood by the side of the road and give it to the other one. And Andrea stores her material, her sculptures at Sophia's home. And they were showing me, or Sophie was showing me the corn crib where all of Andrea's studio or sculptures were. And I was like, you guys have to have a show. I mean, the work
Yeah,
is
that
so
sounds.
much about this back and forth. And then they were gracious enough to let me work with them and put the show together and show the work. So sort of it's the stuff that I've been doing is sort of organically evolved.
Mhm,
So
mhm. And do you have
um,
any upcoming shows where we could see your work in person?
I do not. I'm
Okay.
getting ready to go on a 10-day collage um, residency in Berlin though. So, and that
Oh
will
my
end
gosh, that's so
with a
special.
show. So there's 10 artists who are going to be there for 10 days, all working together.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, what's the name of that residency?
It's called Berlinage.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll put a link in the website, well, and social media website, all the things.
Mhm.
Um, Monica, it's been so great chatting with you. I was so excited to learn about your work and also that you live so close. I love interviewing Hudson Valley artists. It feels very special. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your time.
All right, listeners, that's all for this week. Just a quick announcement, there has been a slight schedule change. I announced during our last episode that this week was supposed to be an interview with Diana Puglisi, but that has been pushed to next week. So be sure to tune in as I will be speaking with Diana about women's health, women's work, and minimalism. Hope you have a good week. Bye-bye.